Check 1 2. Check. Check. One, two, check. Check 1 2.
Is it on? Yes. Are we ready? Oh, wow. That's right here. Test 1, 2, 3. Good volume? Good evening. Can you hear me? What about folks in the back? I see some former students in the house. All right, so welcome to a conversation with Dr. Clotilda Yakumchuck, Creating Space for African Nova Scotian and Health Professions. I want to say thank you to our community members, our friends, distinguished guests, Mayanne Francis and Minister Ince, and all these wonderful people who actually taken time to come out. This event is hosted by the Africentric Learning Institute, TD Bank Group, Health Association of African Canadians, HAC, and Promoting Leadership in Health for African Nova Scotians. The event is hosted by ALI TV, who's a proud sponsor to present this conversation this evening. This presentation is timely, especially when we think of the theme for this year for African Heritage Month, which is Educate, Unite, Celebrate, and Community. So when you think of our community, it is rich with heroes and heroines who have contributed to the fabric of our Black history, but also our societal history. And Dr. Yakumchuck will also be accompanied with Dr. Barb Hamilton-Hinch and Michelle Patrick from Plans and HAT. Before I continue on, I just want to say that I pay homage to all our ancestors who've gone on. They've laid the ground for us, and they've given us their wisdom. I also want to recognize that we are on the land of Mi'kmaq people, Mi'kmaqi, and I want to make sure that that's recognized. So at this time, I'm going to call on Dr. Harvey Miller to say a few words about ALI TV.
Good evening, everyone. Harambe. All right. I just want to, first of all, say this is a beautiful audience. Give yourself a round of applause for coming out to this wonderful event tonight. Thank you for being here to share with us and to help us bask in the wonderful experience and life journey of Dr. Clotilda Yakumchuck. We met her in December, when we were screening some of our ALI videos, the Legacy Stories videos, and we said to her, we're bringing you to Halifax. She wasn't sure that we were serious, but we were serious. So she's here, and we're happy that the Creator has given her longevity, strength, and the fortitude to be here with us today. I just want to tell you a little bit about ALI Television. ALI Television is the premier wing or component of the Africentric Learning Institute. It's a virtual institute, and our mission is to promote Africentricity as a liberating philosophy in the development of African Nova Scotians. And that through ALI Television, we intend to promote the philosophy, but also to put it into action. So we see ourselves, in terms of our vision, as essentially being a living example of Africentricity in action. And so honoring our elders is a very important part of African tradition, and one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that Dr. Yakumchuck was able to share her story with us and with younger generations as well. We are live streaming, just in case you want to tell some friends to watch the program. You could tell them go to twitter.com/AfricentricTV, or you could tell them go to facebook.com/AfricentricTV, and they could actually find the video feed right there. We have some wonderful things coming up in the future, in the near future, because we have some very committed individuals to Africentricity. We have ALI Journal, which will be launching some articles coming up later on in the spring and in the fall and the summer. We have ALI School, where we'll actually be running online courses in Africentricity for our community. and of course, ALI Television, where we get a chance to, to present the African Nova Scotian community to the world, not just to Nova Scotia, but to the entire world. So we thank you for your support. Go out and subscribe. Go to YouTube, subscribe to us, and tell your friends and family all across the country that they could get a window, continue to get a window into what's happening in African Nova Scotia through ALI Television. Thank you very much.
So I'll just say a few words about ALI. Harvey talked about honoring our elders. ALI is dedicated to providing the Africentric leadership that empowers African Nova Scotians to create their own agency. And as Dr. Nam Akbar states, knowledge is the capacity to know oneself and to have the ability to communicate that knowledge to others. So we thank you for this evening for the knowledge that we're going to receive from our honored guests. ALI will continue to provide a voice on critical issues that are facing our African Nova Scotian learners as well as our community. And just like our symbol there, the Sankofa bird, which means we must look back before moving forward so that one can create our own identity and character, what is true in our own historical development. I will now call on Michelle Patrick to speak briefly about plans in HAP.
Thank you, and welcome everyone, and thanks for being here tonight. I'm very pleased to bring greetings and talk about HAWK. Sharon Davis Murdoch and Donna Darrell Smith are co-chairs, and they couldn't be with us tonight, but I know they really wanted to, and maybe watching online from where they are. So HAWK is an organization grounded in Afrocentric principles, and we really want to promote the health and well-being of those of African descent in our communities. And so we take on a variety of community projects, most recently working with the Canadian Diabetes Association for Black Health Matters, looking at chronic illnesses, specifically diabetes within the community, and looking at a peer mentoring model to promote the wellness of those living with the disease, preventing the disease and whatnot. And we've also done some projects with our inmates as well. And so another arm of HAWK is plans. So HAWK is very interested in promoting professionals, health professionals from and in our communities as well. So that's where plans comes in. And so plans has been on the ground for the past 4 years and a little bit, full-time with myself as the program manager. And our goal is really the recruitment and retention of our African-descended youth into those professions and into our communities when they're done. So we do a lot to support that. And one of the things that is really exciting that we've done is our African Nova Scotian, the summer camp, the Health Science Summer Camp, that we've done at Dalhousie, at Cape Breton University, as well as St. FX this past summer. So this summer, we've selected our dates. They're like all of July, just so you know. So if you have youth that are from grade 8 to grade 11, we have a program for them, and we introduce them through hands-on activities to the health sciences and then those careers, and they meet mentors throughout their time with us, and it's a really great opportunity. So thank you again for being here, and if you want information on the summer camps, I do have some in the back, and you can speak to me at any time at plans@dal.ca, and thank you, and I look forward to a great evening.
So I'm not going to prolong this, but I just want to say a big shout out to Marie Berry for all the work she has done in terms of the African Heritage Month, as well as we are honored to be here in the North Branch Library. It's always great because it's just like we're home. Everyone who comes to the events that we have here, we're actually home and participating in some wonderful information regarding our people. So I'm going to turn it now over to Ms. Barb Hamilton Hinch. She's going to begin the discussion with our wonderful guests.
Thank you, Karen. We are so excited that you've joined us this evening, and we're hoping that midway through our questions that we're going to also offer the opportunity for the audience to also ask Dr. Yakumchuck some questions, and we'd love for you to participate. Oh, you want us to pick up the mic? We were hoping it was just projecting from down there. So you may also have to bear with us as we pick up our mics. Okay, I guess it will be good. Can I hold it like that? Does that work? All the ways up? Okay. We didn't do our test 1, 2, so do you want to do your little...
Can you hear me? Well,
Perfect.
okay.
Okay. So as I was saying, we're going to open it up for the audience to also participate. There's lots of lessons to be learned today, and we hope that you have some questions just brewing inside you. It's not often we get to have this knowledge sitting with us, and I often call her auntie, and I will do that this evening as well. And when we met in Cape Breton, I just sat and listened and listened and listened, and it was such a treat. So I could go on, but I'm just going to get into some of our questions. So first I want to say thank you for agreeing to come. I didn't have to twist your arm too much.
Too much. Thank you for asking me.
So we're going to get into some of the questions. Can you just tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
I grew up in Sydney, in Whitney Pier, primarily.
Whitney Pier's in the house.
My parents came from Barbados, and they settled in Whitney Pier. And my father came to work in the steel plant, where many other immigrants from Barbados came, because they were offered plentiful jobs, many jobs, that would afford them a better quality of life. And we had people from not only Barbados, but we had from St. Vincent, Grenada, and we also had black people that came from Tracadie and Guysborough. Now, in addition to the black population that came, we had people of a very unique community, and I call it a cosmopolitan community. They came from Italy, the Ukraine, Hungary, Newfoundland, and all around, and of course, they settled in Whitney Pier, and they worked at the steel plant also. Now, in addition to that, businesses flourished as a result of the immigrant population. And we had all kinds of stores, clothing stores, furniture, shoe stores. We even had doctors, dental and medical clinics. We had Dr. Calder, who had set up his practice, and he practiced out of Whitney Pier and Charlotte Street. We also had Alan Hamilton, who was a lawyer, and he practiced on Bay Street and Townsend Street. So we had many immigrants that flourished in Whitney Pier. Now, in addition to that, in the black community, we had many stores and many tradesmen that came from Barbados and set up businesses there too. We had my father, of course, who had worked in the steel plant for many years, but as a result of discrimination left, and he established his own business, which was hauling coal, selling livestock, and teaching music. So he was quite successful. In addition to that, we had Alec Paris, who had a small store, and he was also a musician. And we had Lem Brewster, who was not only a tailor, but he had a dry cleaning plant. I think we also had, who else can I think of? And just let me check my notes here for a moment.
Well, you might be able to come back to your notes
Come
as
back
well,
to
because
some
we
of those?
have lots of questions that we
Okay.
want to get into. So some of the things that you have in your notes, you might be able to answer within our questions.
Okay, then.
So you just gave us a beautiful picture of Whitney Pier and the different populations that were there and the businesses that were in Whitney Pier. And you mentioned that your father experienced a little bit of discrimination in Whitney Pier. Could you just give me an idea what it was like for you growing up in Whitney Pier?
Well, in Whitney Pier, we going to school, of course, you have the normal fights that you have between young people and among young people, so we had that. But also, I was able to finish school, and I remember failing grade 7, and that was a catastrophe for me. And in those days, parents would give you a lick, what they call a licking for not being successful. And I remember being so ashamed of failing. But it was one of the, maybe the best opportunities for me to do otherwise and to focus a little better as I got older. I finished Sydney Academy and decided that either it was going to be teaching or nursing that I wanted to do. I decided on nursing because I wanted to work with people,
Yes.
I always thought. And also it was an opportunity to, I thought when I completed it, to make a living. And I needed to make a living.
Excellent.
So that was the way I got in. Now, I applied to the schools in Sydney, the schools of nursing, and didn't receive any response immediately, so I know I was not one of their better candidates. And came up to Halifax. And while I was in Halifax, my brother, who was studying pre-med, what they called pre-med at the time, he said, why don't you try the Nova Scotia hospital? So I called and I was invited for an interview, and they accepted me. And I was the first black that was accepted at the Nova Scotia Hospital School of Nursing. And I was very pleased with that. And when I graduated, I was one of the prize winners. And the prize had to do with making the greatest progress in development over the 3 years at the School of Nursing. And I've always appreciated being accepted at the school at Nova Scotia Hospital, because it was one of the places that I thought that even before holistic care became common, that hospital practiced holistic care, because they taught not only looking after the physical being, but the mental health of people too, which became even more important years afterwards.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to the mental health question, because we know that there's lots of great stuff going on right now in our communities, especially looking at mental health. But hearing your story and hearing about the challenge with grade 7, I want to know who influenced you to keep going in school. Did you have someone special that said, you can do this?
It was my mother, really, and I have to thank her for any of the successes that I've had. I have to thank Mom, because she was the one that encouraged me even when things were down. And she really mentioned that, listen, Chloe, you better continue, because one of these days you may have to look after yourself, look after a family, and you never know. And from her perspective, the idea was that if you continued and you had a good job, it may, at least education meant that you had an opportunity for better jobs. And as a result of better jobs, a good living that would support you and a family. And isn't that exactly what happened? About 45 years after that, I had to look after myself, my 5 children, which one is here now, and it was an important, it was a very important recommendation that she said to me. You keep on, finish your schooling, because it meant something in the long run, better opportunities for jobs and to support yourself and family.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle.
So you mentioned doing your schooling over at the Nova Scotia Hospital. And so thinking about that and thinking, you said it was, you felt welcome and included there. Was there much diversity in the classes that were attending the Nova Scotia Hospital other than yourself?
Absolutely none whatsoever. Absolutely not. I was the only one in that school of nursing for a few years well. And even when we affiliated at the VG and the Children's and the Grace Maternity, I never saw any that looked like me, except now I better clarify that, because at the IWK, or which was the Children's Hospital, there were 2 girls from down the valley, and they went into nursing in 51 too.
And what kept you motivated? Not seeing people that looked like you until those later years, but what kept you motivated?
What kept me motivated was the desire to succeed and do something and accomplish something. Mm-hmm. Remember, I already had my lesson with the failure in grade 7. I didn't want to repeat it. So it gave me the impetus to keep going and to try to succeed.
In our conversation, and you also alluded to it a little bit in our introduction, that you had many different positions as a nurse. Can you give us an idea of what was your first job as nursing, and then some of the other jobs that you did within the nursing profession?
Once I finished nursing in 54, I was asked to take on head nurse position at the Nova Scotia Hospital at the rehab unit, and then on the admission unit. And on that admission unit, we had students from all over the province that came for affiliation, and we also had post-grad students later on that I was, I guess, responsible for directing. And we also had about 15 to 20 staff that worked on that unit, especially the admission unit. And it was a very active unit, to say the least.
Excellent. I remember reading shortly after we met in Cape Breton, an article that you presented, and you talked about an experience with a patient within the article. So thinking back about that patient and perhaps some other patients that you might have had, did you encounter, tell us that story about the patients that you encountered that may not want you to take care of them because of the color of your skin?
This one stuck out for me. Many patients were accepting, but you also met people that did not want you near them, or even to nurse them, as the case may be. The one in particular, that when I was the head nurse on the admission unit, she didn't want me near her, or whatever the case. She came from down the valley, I remember. And so I tried to avoid this lady, knowing that she didn't like me anyhow. And after several weeks where she was on this unit, I couldn't avoid her completely as much as I wanted to. But nevertheless, we started talking. And as a result of that, I think she got to know me as a person and could see beyond the color of the skin that maybe I wasn't as bad as she thought I had been in the beginning. And when she was discharged from that unit, she gave me a Royal Dalton cup and saucer that I kept till this day, and I gave it to one of my children in Toronto. So that's one of the stories. So that was as a head nurse. In one of the occasions in Sydney, I was a supervisor. And this particular case that I'm going to share with you has to do with a young man. He was a personal care worker on the unit. And as I was making rounds as a supervisor there, I saw him abusing a patient. I spoke to him. He did not like that I was speaking to him about what I had seen. And of course, he used the N-word, and he said he didn't have to take this from me. So I said, that's fine. So I asked him for his keys, and I suspended him. So when top administration came back the Monday, of course I had written my incident report, and they fired him. So I thought that was very supportive of what I had done. The second occasion had to do with another chap, and he was abusing a patient at the time. This is in Sydney. And again, I spoke to him about the abuse that I had seen, and he didn't like that I was speaking to him. And he used the N-word again, that he did not have to accept this coming from me. And here again, I suspended him. And the Monday or Tuesday that the director of nursing came back, when they read the incident report, they fired him. The key thing with this fella is that at one point, sometime afterwards, we were raising funds to buy a bus so we could take patients on excursions. And we had fundraising, and I saw the chap come into the basement where we were putting on we had different kiosks, different booths. Apparently, he won a painting. He came over to me, said hello, and I said hello because I'm a very polite person. I spoke to him, and he said, I'm very, very sorry for what I had said to you, and it had been about a year or 2 years before that. And I want to show my apology by giving you this painting that I just won. And it was a scenic painting. And he gave me the painting that I kept for many years. So those are two occasions that really stick out of some of the experiences that I've had. And I've been in the field a long time.
It's disappointing to hear about those stories, but also to think that in 2018, some of our students and some of our professionals in the health professions are still going through some of these same challenges. And we know that that can weigh on individuals' lives. And just recently, we were at a presentation on facing racism. And one of the research projects that I was involved in was the impact of racism on our health and well-being. And so as you reflect on your experiences of dealing with those situations, and I acknowledge your strength and your tenacity, otherwise you wouldn't be where you are today. And I want to applaud you for that again. What kind of impact did it have on you personally, and as well as raising your 5 children on your own, in thinking about racism in Whitney-Pier, racism in Nova Scotia, racism in Canada?
I think the biggest thing for me was the first reaction I had was one of anger. And in the setting, you can't very well, I guess, demonstrate or illustrate that to any great extent. So what you do is to hold it as best you can. And then sometimes I used to feel ashamed. Why should I have to accept this? And I was trying to do my best, because part of what I call nursing is being caring for everyone. It's not only people that look like me, but people that are opposite to me too. And I have a responsibility to do that. And I took the responsibility of nursing very, very carefully. And for my children, I always taught my children, and here's one here. I have had 5, so I taught them to be proud of who they are, who they were, and to respect not only themselves, but to respect the people that they come in contact with.
Thank you.
So clearly, throughout your career, you've been quite a trailblazer. And I know that there's many nurses in the room and that are out there as well who are looking up to you as one of the firsts of many things. And one of the things that we know is that you were the first president of the Registered Nurses Association of Nova Scotia, so the first Black registered, first president of that association. So what are some other firsts that you had throughout your career?
In addition to being the first Black person to become president, And I'd like to comment on that one, because I think this is an important
Please
one.
do.
Being the first to be elected president of the Registered Nurses Office of Nova Scotia, and my right-hand lady, who's here in the audience, I'd like to say, Mildred Kettlewell, who was with me through thick and thin. We worked together.
Ask her to stand. Is this lady right here?
Yeah, this lady right
Would you
here.
like to stand and give a little
We
wave?
worked together for 35, 40 years, as the case may be. And as a result of support like that, I was elected, and maybe let me get back a little bit. In order to become president of the Registered Nurses Association of Nova Scotia, you're about 6 years that you're in training before you really become president of the association. It's getting to know the organization inside out. So I went from third vice to second to first vice. And when it was my turn, I was challenged by one of the other board members for the first time in the history of the organization. And she asked me to step back and let her go forward, and I would come after her. And of course, being the nice woman I am, I said no. I said no, I think it was my turn now. So it meant then that we had to go through an election from one end of the province to the other. We had approximately 9,000 nurses
Wow,
represented in Nova Scotia.
that's a good number.
And of that, I don't think, if I remember correctly, that we had 50 nurses that were black. The majority were Caucasian. So we traveled I took a page out of the politicians' books and traveled from one end of the province to the other. And I have another nurse that's here from other nurses that are here when I was running for election. And of course, as you travel and you become, you talk about what you're going to do as you become president. So the election came. The election ran, and I won the election. For the first time in 100 years of the organization, we had a person, a black president of that organization. Throughout the 2 years that you ran as president, I went to I think it was 52 hospitals, speaking to nurses from one end of the province to the other, and I spoke about the regulatory body, the organization, and what we were responsible for, including the standards of nursing in Nova Scotia. And at that particular time, remember, we were moving from the 3-year nursing program, which all the schools had, moving to a baccalaureate. And of course, I was the representative for Nova Scotia on the baccalaureate to talk about the baccalaureate, and as we moved to that, to help move that forward. But it was an exciting time. It's one that I really enjoyed. I got to meet many nurses, and I met a few of the nurses this evening that came back to see the old face, and I'm still here. Yeah.
Good, thank you. And what were some of the other firsts? I know that we talked about when we were in Cape Breton, some of the other trailblazing initiatives that you also done, both within Cape Breton, the community, as well as in the profession of nursing.
Oh, I was producer of a radio program. This is talking about community now. A radio program called Black Insights, One of the things I noted, and I've noticed, is that we did not have many people that looked like me in the medium. So I applied for a federal grant, and maybe let me backtrack a second now. Formed an organization that was called the Black Community Development Organization of Cape Breton. And the mandate of that organization was improved housing because of a dilapidated housing in Whitney Pier at the time. And also, we had too many of our children that were either failing schools or not doing, or being placed in auxiliary classes. And then the last thing was, part of the mandate was, if you don't know who you are, how are we going to move ahead? So it was dealing with culture. So that was the mandate of the organization. Now, in addition to having meetings about the housing and housing conditions, I also thought that many blacks were not on radio or on television. So I applied to the federal government for a grant, received the grant, and ran a radio program that I was the producer of called Black Insights. The first hostess of that program was Judy Tucson. She was very articulate. She had finished nursing, and on that radio program, we talked about, she interviewed people who came from the West Indies to talk about their experience in coming to Sydney. What was it like for them? What were some of the experiences they had? And also we had calypso music, West Indian music. We also had recipes. So that was the focus of the radio program. And that program ran for about 5 years. After Judy finished, she left and she moved to BC. My daughter, Valerie, took it over as the hostess for the program. I was always very proud of that program because we did not have, and still do not have, very many blacks in news media. So that was pretty innovative, I think, for the time.
And thinking about the fact that you started to expand and get more people involved in the media, and one thing that I want to make note of is, as you know, that nursing used to be a predominantly, and still is to a degree, female occupation. Now there's men coming into the profession, which is exciting.
I think it's long overpassed. It was certainly overdue that we had more men in nursing. And Millie, you'll remember we used to talk about the need for more men to make it more reflective of the communities that we nursed and looked after. It was always a female-dominated profession. Still is female-dominated, but at least now we do have many more men that are coming into nursing and using that as a profession. And we're proud that we are now mixed. And I think they do have more blacks that are coming into the nursing profession too. I think that should be reflective of the communities that we represent. In Cape Breton, I remember at one point going to Antigonish, Tracadie, Guysborough, New Glasgow, and talking about the need, not only talking about health issues that affected black people, but talking about the need for more of people that look like me in the profession. And not only in the profession of general duty nursing, but people in fields of administration that we needed, people that are responsible for making and participating and contributing to policy development. We need more people like that.
I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to give you some updates on some of the stuff that's happening within plans and nursing, particularly in other areas of, and perhaps build on what you just said in terms of the need to increase. So
Yes, so we definitely still need to see an increase of the representation within our health professions, but nursing is doing well. I know that Dalhousie, St. FX, and Cape Breton definitely have a mandate to diversify their classes, and they're working alongside plans to recruit students of African descent into those programs, and are working alongside of us with our youth camps, and they have another number of initiatives throughout the school years as well to reach out to youth and get them interested in nursing. So we are seeing the numbers slowly creep up, and many of our nurses do want to stay in our communities, which is really great, so that it is reflective of our community. So they're looking forward to going home and staying here in the province and working.
So that's wonderful. Finally, we're getting more.
We're moving that way.
And more.
And so one thing I want to talk about as we look at this book that's on the table, and I'm just going to ask you if you can pick up that book and just show it to folks, and if you can tell us a little bit about why you've done this book and what this book is about.
One of the things I've never been able to accomplish is to get a degree in nursing. I've had postgrad in mental health. I've had postgrad in midwifery, adult education from St. FX, but I've never been able to afford to go in to get a degree in nursing. There was a committee formed 25, almost 30 years ago, the Continuing Education Committee, that I was asked to be the chair of the committee. And who was with the committee with me? My right-hand lady, Mildred Kettlewell. We were together on that committee, and the focus of that committee was to put on educational programs for nurses in the area of Cape Breton. We also realized that there was going to be, I guess, a change in nursing, that there was a need for nurses to get their degrees because it was on the pipes coming down. We decided we were going to jump the guns, and on this committee we had the staff development people from each of the hospitals. Mildred was the staff development from Northside General. I was of the Cape Breton Hospital, and the other hospitals were also represented. What we did was we contacted people at the university, Dr. Donald Dunbar, Sheldon McGuinness was in continuing education, and asked them, why could we not have a degree program for nurses in Cape Breton? Because we had a number of people who had graduated from the RN program, but wanted a degree also. We got the committee together, and together we invited the Dean of Nursing from the University of Toronto to come down, look at a curriculum, look at the staff that we may need, and see if we could make out an application, which we did, and to see if we could get approval from the Maritime MPHEC. Maritime for higher education, anyhow. We would have to get approval for this program. We applied, but we were not very successful. And also, in addition to that, we had some of our nurses who went away to get their masters. They went to Boston and they went to Dalhousie University. So we felt we were quite ready to cope with a degree if we received approval at Cape Breton University. Lo and behold, I think some people thought that we were a little too presumptuous to think that we would take students from St. FX, and we would also take students from Dal, because remember, many of their population came from Cape Breton. So they were not too happy to have Cape Breton University approve this program or get approval for this program. So, needless to say, that went the way of all things, just laid there. People came back from their studies. They received, were waiting then to teach in this degree program at Cape Breton University. And I was so happy because I thought I was going to be one of the first coming down the aisle when they granted degrees. I was getting mine. Millie was getting hers too. Needless to say, that did not happen. 25 years afterwards, I think Cape Breton University finally got approval for a degree program for nurses in that university. But the seed had been planted 25 years ago by us. And I'm very proud to say we finally have it. Yeah, we did, yeah.
And so from the book, you were able to...
Now, let me move forward. One of the things we were always conscious of, and I was very conscious of, I couldn't afford to go to university. I wanted to, but I also had 4 children and then 5 children, and I could not afford to take the time and the energy to get a degree in nursing. When I retired in '94, one of the committees that we have at home, I'm a committee person. One of the things that we have in Cape Breton is called the Cape Breton Retired Nurses Group. When I became president of that group, we needed a project. We wanted a project to work on. At the time, we thought that, and when I say I've never reached the success that I've reached to date without support from people. And I've always been very grateful for people like Mildred Kettlewell, who was always with me, and other people. So we wanted a project to work on. And I said, why not, and we came up with the idea, why not capture the schools of nursing graduates, girls or men who graduated from the schools of nursing, give a narrative about their history, their experience. We got a grant again. I'm thankful for the grants. And we came up, Dr. Bob Morgan was our advisor, and we spoke to him about this particular project. Well, the end product of that discussion was a book, Reflections of Care, and it's the story of 70 nurses who had graduated from the schools around Cape Breton, and they placed their stories in here. The proceeds from here, I think we made about $15,000 to $20,000. And we have an endowment at Cape Breton University to help support nursing students. And this is the book. I was not able to achieve what I saw as part of my goals, but nevertheless I'm able, I think, and we are able, through this book, to help other students who need the financial support. So the book is called Reflections of Care.
And we're gonna now take some questions from the audience. I think there's a microphone floating around if anyone has any questions. There's a couple microphones. Burning questions.
It could be questions or comments. Otherwise, we can keep going. We have lots.
Anybody have a question?
Hi, I'm Janet Bronstein Moody, And I met Clotilda when I arrived in Nova Scotia in the 1980s. And I told her tonight that she was one of the most welcoming nurses that I had ever met when I met her. And she was warm, welcoming, loving, professional, and she represented nurses like you wanted nurses to be represented. And I didn't know this, I don't recall the election, but I found that very interesting. And I have to tell you, we won big.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
I think you're all feeling like us, being just mesmerized by the stories, because we sat the whole day for like hours wanting to keep talking. So, okay, we'll go to Amy. You have a question?
Hi, I'm
Hello.
Amy Moonshadow, and quite a few years ago, I was a teaching assistant at Dalhousie School of Nursing in the community health class, and it was a very clean, white, middle-class school. You know, there was two of the class of 121, two people that would be considered equity. One, an African woman who was doing her post-RN, and another young man. But my question is, what could we do to lobby to have all you nurses that, you know, deserve it, have honorary nursing, like, you know, I mean, like, they love, you know, I mean, like, and it's usually a money thing, you know, you give the university some money and you suddenly have an honorary degree. Well, you know, you've given your life, you know, you and your co-workers have given your life, so I would suggest, you know, that we all are people of some sort of influence, that we should suggest that you graduates get an honorary RN.
That would be wonderful if it could happen. So maybe you would initiate it and keep it going. Just talk about it a little more.
I'm going to keep on going, but feel free to pop in as we go. We're slowly getting out of our time, but I know there's just a couple more questions that we wanted to ask you, and then we'll be having some refreshments and opportunity to connect with some people that are here. So I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll turn it over to Michelle. We'll just skip around a little bit. So I know that there was a time when you didn't always just stay in Whitney Pier, that you also went to the Caribbean and did some nursing there. Can you take us a little bit around that part of your experiences and perhaps other places you might have been to where you practiced your nursing?
I lived in the Caribbean for about 11 years. And my first husband and Ken's father was from Grenada. And we lived in Grenada, and some of my children were born in Grenada. And when I was there, after 2 years of being a woman of luxury, because my stand-up, Ken, I'm very proud of him. He's now a lawyer too, but his father was also a lawyer. He had his master's of law from Dal with a focus on constitutional law. So we lived in the Caribbean, and after, as I said, I lived like a woman of luxury for 2 years with the maids and everything else, decided that I wanted to go out to work. So in speaking with the superintendent of nursing there, she said if I had midwifery as my experience, along with the psychiatric nursing, that I could become matron, what they call matron, or a director of nursing of the psychiatric hospital in Grenada, which I did. And in Grenada, one of the things I had to do before I could practice nursing is to do midwifery. So I studied under a midwife and I had 30 deliveries. So if anybody wants to have a baby here, I think I could help you out. So I did the 30 deliveries, and then I started to work at the psychiatric hospital. The hospital that was bombed by the Americans years afterwards is the hospital that I was in charge of. It was a small hospital, a psychiatric hospital, about 75 beds there. And if you recall, years ago, as long as you were strong and able, you worked in psychiatric hospitals. It wasn't a therapeutic type of setting at that time. So, seeing a need, I started training programs for people that worked at that psychiatric hospital, not only making beds, but looking after patients, and also therapeutic in terms of the kinds of communications they had with patients. So underactive, overactive, suspicious, all kinds of behaviors that I taught at this particular hospital. So after the psychiatric, so that was the first educated psychiatric matron that they had at that hospital. So that's one of the firsts. In addition to that, remember, psychiatry was becoming important. Psychiatric nursing was becoming important. So the superintendent of nursing that I had spoken about just briefly, she asked me if I could set up a program for the people who were training at the Colony Hospital in Grenada. And of course, I'm getting bold now. I said, of course, I could set that up. I thought I was pretty good. So I set up programs for people that were in the schools of nursing, and I taught there for quite a few years. Now, remember, people that wanted to migrate to the States or even Canada or even England, and if you did not have psychiatric nursing as part of your curriculum, you were frowned on. So Grenada, and with my help, we were able to, for the nurses then, to have a completed curriculum that was well looked after in Canada and also the States. So that's how I started getting into teaching. I found not only that I liked it, that I was good at it, they told me, and I received good feedback from that. So when I came back to Sydney now, to Cape Breton, I wanted to look for a job. I went to St. Rita Hospital, I might as well say it. They wouldn't accept me. I was turned down from there because they said I didn't have enough experience to work at St. Rita Hospital. I was pretty disappointed and hurt with that because, again, I thought, I'm from Sydney. I'm originally from Sydney. I've worked in Halifax for a little while, worked in the Caribbean for 11 years, and coming back to Sydney, I couldn't even get a job. So that's how I happened to turn up then at Sydney City Hospital, and Miss Anderson, who was the director of nursing, accepted me and she sent me to Ward 1. I received a very, very, very positive evaluation after being on that unit for a number of years. So when one door closes, another one opens. And it was Miss Anderson that gave me the opportunity. However, I must put a little something on to the end of that. The same lady that turned me down from the position at St. Rita was pursuing distance program from the University of Ottawa. And didn't she come to ask for help in a project that she was doing? I was of two minds at the time. But I would like to say I'm not a mean person most times. And I gave her the help, and she came out with an A+. And I don't know if that was, looking back, no, I'll put it this way. Looking back, I think it was something good that she did for me in turning me down. Because what happened was that when I went then, and I was invited and asked to go to Cape Breton Hospital, I didn't apply there. But when I went out there, the person that was the CEO was one who was extremely supportive of me and gave me the help, the leeway, the openness to pursue not only the hospital's interests, but my interests too. And that's how I got involved in continuing education, got involved in the professional organization, watched the growth and helped contribute to the growth of the organization, because he allowed me the freedom to do that. And if I had gone to St. Rita Hospital, that was a very closed unit, I would not have been able to succeed. And it's funny how you look back in life and you think that a road was closed, but another road opened. And I think the success that I've had throughout life is not only about the good friends that I've made, but also the administration that allowed me the leeway to explore and pursue things that were of interest to me.
I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to take us on home with the last three. So I understand that you received the Order of Nova Scotia. Is that correct? Some time ago?
I've never received the only awards I've never received was the Order of Nova Scotia.
Oh, well, it's the Order of Canada, is it?
I have the Order of Canada.
Ah, well, we'll work on the other one. That's good to know. Don't you worry.
They're
As you
accepting
say, when one road opens, another one closes. So that road is now opening. So tell us about you receiving the Order of Canada.
I got the Order of Canada for two reasons, I think. One had to do with that program called Black Insights, where it was innovative, I guess encouraging young black people to get involved in the media, which of course I had never, and many of us have not seen. And then on that housing project, because we did have educational programs on from the Black Community Development Organization, where we had programs where we invited George Phils, you remember the Phils family, anyhow. We had a program called, let me see if I can think, Thinking on Black Culture was the theme of the program that we had. And throughout that program, we had people invited from all over Canada to speak to the people in Cape Breton at the Melnick Hall at the time. And that program was quite successful. And as a result of that, I think that's how I happened to get the Order of Canada. And the Harry Jerome Award, too, was that I was able to receive. But it was mainly because of some of those programs. Also, I've always believed that some men are not very anxious. They don't follow up doctors and go to doctors like most women do. And I think we're well aware of that.
Thank you.
Some men in the audience. So as a result of that, we put on, when I say I, it's we. I'm able to have people who are supportive of projects that I've put forward as a thought. We put on a program called, it was doing an assessment of men. Where do they get their information on health? How do they, where do they access their information? How frequently do they go to get prostate examination and everything else and high blood pressure? And again, keep in mind that with some of these health issues for men, that black people seem to be more prone than the Caucasian population. So we did a week's program on that. I was able to get a lady from, and I can't even think of her name now, from Dal, who came to evaluate the program for us and to run the program for a week. And we interviewed men in the Cape Breton area about their frequency at doctor's offices. Where do they get their information? When was their last PAP? When was their blood pressure? So programs such as that we ran in Cape Breton. So we were very, very active in some of the programs that we put on. So I think it's the composite of all of that that got us the Harry Jerome and the Order of Canada.
Beautiful. Thank you. Go ahead. Take it away.
So lots of awards, and still, through it, we've discovered a few more to come. The few of us are going to start some campaigns. So many of us, and I gave you a little, little update about the recruitment and of nurses in our schools here in Nova Scotia and really across Canada. I think many people are doing lots to promote that. And so for those of us who are working with youth and trying to encourage them to go into the professions, what would you say that needs to be done to get people to start thinking about nursing as a career and pushing them, not pushing them, but encouraging them into that direction?
Keep in mind that today, I think youth, they have many more opportunities and many more fields that they can get into. But for me, I think nursing is one of the best professions that one could go to or could follow. And I think that we need to encourage and talk about the positives about being in a nursing profession nowadays. And hopefully the job markets are going to open even more so. The variety of fields that you can get into in healthcare should be an enticement, I think, for many people that want to get into that could go into the field of nursing.
And any particular advice for those who are in the nursing programs? I'm going to make all of my students who are in nursing watch this in my classes. And so if you could speak to them, so they're studying nursing, they're on their break right now, so I expect that's why some of them aren't here in person. If you had some advice for those students who are in the midst of their programs, just finishing up midterms, what would that be?
I think it's one of the most challenging professions that one could pursue today. I think that the field, I think even although it's narrowed at this point, it seems, I think that there's still a way to go for the field to open again as it used to be, because one of the reasons I chose nursing because I thought I would never be without a job. And luckily, let me knock on wood, I've never been without a job. And I think today, I think that the field is still fairly open. I think there's still jobs available. And I think it's one of the professions that you can receive a lot of satisfaction, and not only monetary, but also satisfaction for the contribution that you're making to healthcare and to people in general. And I think that's why you get into caring and why you get into nursing. And as I think Dr. Simone Roach from New Waterford said, it's one of the most caring professions, and it's one that we should pursue or can pursue. And it gives you a lot of satisfaction to know that you are helping people and helping someone else besides yourself.
Thank you.
So that wraps it up, unless there's anything else that you wanted to add that we didn't already ask.
I think the only thing I want to add, oh, somebody else had their hand up down there? No.
Thank you, Ms. Yakumchuck, for sharing your stories with us and your life experiences. With all of your knowledge and experience in the health field, what do you think of the state of the healthcare system today, and how, and especially in terms of mental health? I know that's a loaded question.
Is it
but
ever?
I know, but I bet you probably have a comment or two about it.
It's a loaded question, and I'm not even quite sure how to answer it, because the whole healthcare system in Nova Scotia seemed to be in a state of flux. Flux in terms, and I'm not even quite sure where it's going. And even although I've had the experience of being in healthcare for many years, I'm still not sure and clear where healthcare is going. I know there are many complaints from many people about what's happening. But I'll share a story with you. Just last week, I had to go to the hospital by ambulance myself. So I'm just recuperating, and I'm just thankful for the help that I got, because I had to go by ambulance. I had quite a episode that I won't get into now, but nevertheless, sometimes when you really need it, the system can be there for you. But I know there are many people that are not that fortunate. And I think unless we start getting involved in expressing our views about the dissatisfaction, not only the satisfaction, but where you want healthcare to go, I think it's not going to change. So and for mental health, that has always been the poor cousin of healthcare. We've said that, I've said that, many nurses who worked at Nova Scotia Hospital, we've always said it, because it seems that everything goes toward, money-wise, goes towards the acute care setting, and they forget about people who need mental health services. And that has never been, and it's still not as good as it should be. So I think it's time for people to wake up. It's time for them to start making noises about what they want in mental health, and start demanding it from your politicians, if they're the ones that's going to direct healthcare. But I question if politicians should be one to make the decisions on that. So don't accept it.
We have another question for you.
So thank you. You know, I cannot miss this opportunity of saying this publicly, what you already know. As a woman of African descent, a Caribbean woman, as a nurse here in Nova Scotia for the last how many years, we were honored and privileged when you became the first president, Black woman of the Registered Nurses of Association. There has been many struggles and many challenges as a Black nurse, or a nurse of African descent here in Halifax. Many of us have lived this, and there aren't many of us. I can remember there were 5 of us who were more or less trailblazers. But you were one of the people who you were like an anchor for us. You were a mentor for us. You provided leadership and guidance.
and you provided the respect we needed. And even though this is 2018 and people may not realize it, as a health professional, it is one of the most challenging places to work, whether it's provincial, federal, or local. Because the subtle racism and discrimination that goes on, the things that we talk about and we say that doesn't transpire into reality, it's incredible. And so you were one of the people who helped us when we had our struggles. And I will be remiss on behalf of my other colleagues if I don't stand up here tonight and pay tribute to you, because you were one of the rock. When things were rough, we had a role model and a mentor. And I want to say thank you for that on behalf of the people who are not here tonight.
Thank you so very much, Josephine. You brought tears to my eyes, too. And I remember the days. Time will not permit me to share all, but I shared with you this evening some of the experiences, some of the successes, some of the failures that I've had over the years. And as I guess we're coming to a close, I just want to thank Barb, Dr. Miller, Dr. Hudson, and thank you for inviting me, because it's not that often that people from Cape Breton get an invitation to come to speak in Halifax. So for that privilege, I want to thank you so very, very much. And I hope that I've lived up to the expectation of sharing with you some of the experiences. Someone has asked me to write a book. Well, I'm not that I don't think I'm that, what is it? Whatever the word is, put in. To write a book about that. That would be quite a strenuous task today. But nevertheless, I don't mind sharing some of the stories that I've had about the experiences that I've had. And I just want to just close by thanking you for inviting me here this evening. It's my privilege to share that with you.
Thank you. I also want to take this opportunity and ask any nurses that we have with us today, RNs, anyone who identifies within the nursing profession, to please stand and be acknowledged. And we ask that you stick around later for a picture with Dr. Yakumchuck. So if you can stand, please stand. If not, please wave your hands. And we hope to be able to get a picture of you before we go out and have refreshments. So please don't run away. It's not often we get a chance to both celebrate our nurses of African descent and our nurses in general who do so much and often go above and beyond your call of duty. And we applaud you and thank you for in our lives. One of us was touched by a nurse at some time in our life. And so it's almost like what they say about good architects and engineers. They're involved in everything. As our nurses within the health professions, at some point in our life, we owe some of our time to a nurse. So we also thank you for the work that you do and continue to do. And so that concludes our evening. We do have one final closing that we want to also honor you. And we couldn't do more. I mean, we couldn't do enough. And we're hoping there's two things that I have on my list that we need to make happen. One is the Order of Nova Scotia, so I'm claiming that in advance. I'm a strong Christian woman. I speak into existence, it will be. Yes. Another is your story. Yes. That needs to be written. Kendra's gonna help. We will find somebody to have that story written. Another one is a documentary and a film. We've now have quite a bit of documentary on you. Your story is going to be told not just within the province of Nova Scotia, not just within Canada, but abroad. We need to get your story out internationally. And so we want to thank you for the time you've given to us, for coming to us at the hotel on a stormy day, for driving there on your own. We had stayed at the Cape Breton. We missed our plane 3 times. It got delayed because of the storm. And each time we're like, oh, we could have still been in the hotel having our conversation, because we rushed to go and catch our plane. So, and I thank you for accepting our invitation to come back. More people need to hear your story than just the 3 of us that sat in the hotel room and were mesmerized by the work that you've done. And we stand on your shoulders.
Thank you.
So now so before we close, I just want to recognize Kendrick, Lynette, and granddaughter, I don't know her name, Malaya, for coming out tonight and allowing us to be part of your mom's life and part of her journey. And it was like Barb said, oh, Mom, want to say something. You get.
Can I say something?
Yes, you may.
I think I've said earlier that no one succeeds alone. And I'd just like to introduce my family, who's been with me through thick and thin, good times as well as bad times. But we've been together, and family is extremely important. You may guess from me. Can I have my family stand? Thelma, my sister, my nephew, the Honorable Tony, my sister Thelma Innes, my granddaughter Malaya, my daughter-in-law, and then my son Ken, you met a few moments ago. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to call on Divina Bernard, and she's going to bring closing remarks and give thank yous on behalf of ALI.
I thank you, Karen. You did a lot of thank yous already. I don't know if there's anything left for me to say. There's a lot to be thankful for, and the first thing I did want to do was acknowledge Mrs. Ince, because she is clearly the elder in this room tonight, and her son, MLA, the Honorable Tony Ince. Tony, you know I had to acknowledge your mother before acknowledging you, because I know you agree with me that age trumps position. She can take you out. I also want to acknowledge former Lieutenant Governor Dr. May Ann Francis as well, who, of course, is from Cape Breton. Cape Breton. Oh, gotta get that right. She's from the pier. Whitney Pier. Beautiful area. So I'm so sorry to have been remiss not to acknowledge the Chief Justice for Nova Scotia. Please, sir. What's your name? Thank you for also from Whitney. Whitney Pier is well overrepresented here tonight. It's well represented, and and his wife. We are very blessed to have both of you here tonight. We are very blessed to have that. Well, you know, Cape Breton is very mighty. Everybody knows that. And it's not surprising that our guests, you know, because Cape Breton with its fighting union spirit, it's not surprising that the first African person to be the head of such a huge union like that would have come from Cape Breton as opposed to elsewhere. So it's indeed my pleasure to make a few closing remarks and express gratitude to all of those who made this event a reality here tonight. And I have to tell you, my heart is really full as I sort of reflect, you know, on what was, I would say, purely an amazing event that has transpired here, and the presentation that was made. Dr. Clotilda, there were so many times tonight that I think my heart was just overflowing with pride for the things that you offered to us and the joy that you brought, the power and the passion of all that you've said. When I think of what you said about Black Insight, the news format that you put forward in here, we are in 2018 doing ALI TV, and you were long ahead of that back then. And you paved the way, because I truly believe when people put things out in the universe like that, that there's a law of, they call it attraction now, that just plants seeds for things of today. So I thank you for that. And I also just want to comment too, and we're just blessed by your humility here this evening, because every time you begin to use the word I, you said, I mean we. And we don't do that enough. And that's probably why you were so successful in all that you did, because you brought others along with you. And that's truly amazing. Our theme for African Heritage Month this year is educate, unite, celebrate, community. And tonight, we have been richly educated and spiritually uplifted as we've listened to your personal testimony, your wisdom, and your advice. Dr. Clotilda is certainly a treasure to our community. I think there's no disagreement on that. She blazed a trail for so many to follow, not just as an amazing person of African descent, who succeeded against the odds of, as you showed us, talked about your education, about a racially oppressive, I guess, education system, but you also struck a blow for women who are often marginalized, we know that, in public and private spaces, and in roles and careers that often don't get the respect and the equal pay and the rightful value from society. And you made a mark for that. And we really are very pleased and proud. But more than that, be an exemplary woman is who you are, and an accomplished woman of African descent, and a celebrated healthcare professional. And that's extremely amazing. And not just those things, but you are an amazing person, an amazing spirit. And it's not just being an amazing Black woman, woman of African descent, or amazing nurse, or amazing career person, but you're an amazing person. And that we are so proud for the spirit that you have given, an amazing human being. So for these things, Dr. Yakumchuck, we truly give you our thanks. We are grateful for the gifts that you've given to us. I have to say, I have a soft spot for nurses because, as Barb said, we all will encounter them in our life. But I had two aunties who were what they called nurse assistants back in those days. And then my eldest sister studied psychiatric nursing at Douglas Hospital in Montreal. And she had a whole career in nursing. And my sister, who's just a couple years younger than me, just retired recently. She had gone to the VG hospital, become an RN, and then later on went to Dow to do the Bachelor of Nursing. So when I call her tonight, she's watching this live stream. So I'll say to her, you need to thank Dr. Yakumchuck for planting the seeds for that degree program. So we're very happy. You will be glad to know that my mom did say to me, well, your older sister's a nurse and this one's a nurse, so you should be a nurse. Now, mind you, I probably could have passed the coursework. I would have failed bedside manner. So you'll be glad that I had enough sense not to go in that. Thank you very much. The Africentric Learning Institute and ALI TV would like to express thanks to each and every one of you who are here. We have some special thanks to give to those who've sponsored this event. We want to just mention those now. As always, first of all of you for being here, and we know that like always with an African Heritage Month event, there's other things taking place. So tonight we were up against a Black Lives Matter event. Sister and Deaconess Melinda Day had sent us a note saying, please give Dr. Clotilda my regrets, because there is an event tonight for youth, honoring some youth that she was attending and being connected to that through the church. And so I told her I would pass that along and thank Cornwall Street Church for praying for us to have a good event, even though some members couldn't be here. We thank our great panelists, Michelle, and Barb, who did a fantastic job. Michelle Patrick, Barb Hamilton. We want to thank the members of HAC, the Health Association of African Canadians, for being party to this as well. We really thank them. And we thank the members of PLAN, which is promoting leadership and health for African Nova Scotians. And our ALI TV producer, camera person, and everything else, Dr. Harvey Miller, we thank you. The caterers outside, Charlotte Simmons, they always offer up great eats, and you will have some shortly. I'm just coming down to the last couple. And you thanked your son, but we had it on here to thank your son, who we know is a prominent lawyer in this city, Kendrick. We thank you officially for all the logistical coordination of getting your mom here. Good son. And last but not least, we want to thank two of our very important principal sponsors, and those are the Halifax North Branch Regional Library, Halifax Public Library, and in particular Marie Berry for all her work in coordinating so many events this month, and we thank her for that. And of course, we reserve a huge bit of thanks for the principal sponsor for many events this year, which is the TD Group of banks, and so we thank them. And we didn't have the green chair here tonight, but my favorite color is purple anyway, and it matches the African cloth. That went just well. But we thank TD for their support over the month. So on behalf of the ALI chairperson, Karen Hudson, and all of us who have been involved, thank you once again for coming, and please join us next door for a reception and some refreshments. And again, drive safe as you leave here tonight, and let's go next door.
We want a picture of the nurses.
I'm sorry?
Picture of the nurses.
And we want to get a picture. Did we have any male nurses in here tonight? No? Any of the?
Nurses were men, he said.
Yeah, we just had, okay. So we got them all to stand, right? All the people that were nurses, we had them all stand. And so should we ask them to go to any particular spot? So get all the nurses. We're going to do two pictures, one of the African Nova Scotian nurses, and then we want to do one of all nurses here in this place tonight. So if all the members of the African Nova Scotian community who are nurses would come up here in front of these signs, and then once we take a picture of all the African Nova Scotian nurses, we will then invite all those wonderful souls who are nurses to be in a group picture as well.
Before we close and take the picture, I just got a question to ask everyone here. How many of you have heard of Florence Nightingale? Raise your hands. How many of you have heard of Mary Seacole? Mary Seacole was a black Jamaican nurse who worked alongside in the war alongside of Florence Nightingale, but she never got the recognition that Florence Nightingale had gotten. So I am proud to stand here tonight to applaud Nova Scotia's Mary Seacole in Dr. Yakumchuck. Thank you.
And for anyone who may not know, this is Martha Brown, who is also a nurse. Retired nurse. That's good. So if we can get everybody, we've got Miss Moxley. Thank you, Miss Moxley. We've got Miss okay.
I'll help you.
Do we have any others? So we can get their names on camera. We have
Martha Brown.
Okay, we got these. Is the camera rolling, Harvey? So we can get their names on camera for when you edit this? Harvey, is your camera rolling? Harvey Miller, is the camera rolling? I just wanted to get their names, that's all. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to get each of you to speak your name, so when he edits this, he'll just put your names underneath, put it up. So we have
Charlotte Williams.
Charlotte Williams from Charlotte? Charlotte.
Yes.
L-O-T-T-E. From?
East Preston.
Charlotte Williams from East Preston. We have?
Martha Brown.
From?
Dartmouth.
Martha Brown from Dartmouth. I thought you were from New Glasgow. Originally from New Glasgow. Well, that's important. Originally from Antigonish. Monastery. Okay, monastery. That'll be important when we do the picture and put it online. Okay, and we have?
Isabel Waterman, formerly of Whitney Pier.
Okay, you got it right.
Josephine Maxlow, originally from Trinidad and Tobago, now live in Dartmouth.
Okay, wonderful.
Courtney Williams from Dartmouth.
Courtney Williams from Dartmouth. And we know who the woman of honor is. And that's your mother. Oh, that's amazing. Wow, that's great. Okay, let me get out of the picture. Okay, great. So now you guys stay in place. There's other sisters here tonight, all the other women who came out to support this, other nurses. Could you all please step into the frame? And they'll tell you if you got a good balance. Maybe one person come on this side, and then you can step in a bit more, so you can see. Right. Thank you, women. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Okay, please join us next door and for the reception. Thanks for coming. That's beautiful.
Everyone, food is served outside. Food is being served outside. We have some good treats out there. So please help yourself and enjoy the meal. Well, snacks and warm food. Those are too expensive.
So who should we give legacy to?
I have to get money for Sarah.
Yes. For everything, right? Everything. Okay. So we gave people $1,000. You said it's okay. I told them to share all our stuff. Food and their sound system. So next year we're gonna think of our next event.
Oh, you're thinking about next year already?
I may not make it to all the meetings, but I do try to go over and I try to give my little input or something. And I will call, won't I?
Oh yeah, you're good.
That's right.
I'm getting better at returning the
That's right, because I
Let me
can't
stop
always
the
get in the middle of the
swimming.
meetings. I'm at work, right? But I can